This video is how to change your front disc brake pads and rotors on the Smart Car 453. Here's the grease points. I'm going to start out, of course, take the tire on the wheel off. Here's a look at the caliper. I had to remove the two pins. Show them here in a minute. There's one, and also the two bolts to take that caliper off. First we'll do the pins. There's one, the top pin, or bolt, I guess you could say. There's two caps on there. You remove those first. And it's a T40, I believe, to take those off. There's a cap. Like I say, you remove those first, then you use the T40 to remove the two bolts to back them off. Actually, you take them off to go ahead and grease them to get them put back on. Clean them up, make sure they're smooth, and grease them. Here's a T40. Here, I'm removing the top bolt first. Remove the bottom bolt. Next you need to take a C-clamp, compress the piston. After you got to remove that spring, take a screwdriver, just pops off. All right, yep, just showing how it goes back in place there. It's one of the trickier parts, getting that thing back on when you're ready for that part. But for now, just showing you how it was installed there. Okay, now we got the bolts backed off, got that spring off. It just slides off, and the piston was pressed back in. You'll double check that when you're getting ready to reassemble. You don't want to brake, put too much. It doesn't take a lot of pressure, but you can tell when that piston's back in place. Now we got to remove the two bolts that hold the caliper holder there on. I believe they're number 18, I think, for that. There's one of the bolts already out. Okay, got both bolts off, got the caliper holder off. Now to remove the rotor, you got to take, I think those were, forget the number now for that torque. There we go. Take both of those out. Then you're going to need the trusty hammer, because this was been on there for so many years. It's kind of like rust. It's pretty much stuck on there. I had to tap it around. Here's a look at the new rotor. When you go to put that, I cleaned that up too, some sandpaper and so forth, just to clean up some of that rust off of it. You'll also want to make sure when you line that rotor up, the new one, you get the holes lined up correct. Your lug nuts and the two bolts that torque screw that hold that on. Don't want to make that mistake, or you got to take it all back apart. Here I just cleaned all the connection points up. Pistons push back in. Then apply the grease to the pins and to the end of the disc pads. Shows you on that diagram at the beginning. Next we'll put the inner pad, snaps back into the piston there. There's the 2 pins, got those cleaned up, make sure no rough edges on, it's all cleaned up, ready, and then greased. Put those back in place. Here's everything cleaned up, ready to go back on. The disc, also took disc brake cleaner, cleaned the discs off on both sides. The coating they put on from the factory to protect it when it's in the box. Like I say, here you want to make sure you get those the torque screws go in and your lug nut holes are lined up correctly. Everything back in place. Next, I have to put the caliper holder back on the mount. Those 2 bolts that use, I believe it was the 18mm socket. Also, I found out that they gave me the new screws there to put on the rotor. The one box didn't have them, but the other box did. There, I got the mount back on. As you can see there, there's the mount. 2 bolts, torqued them back on. There's the top bolt. Next, putting the inner disc pad on. That just snaps in place inside the piston there. Next, put the outer pad in place. Put the grease on the tabs on both ends. And that slides back in there. Show it here in a second. There we go, slid back into place. Now we're ready to slide the caliper back on. There, slid the caliper back on in place. Now we'll put the 2 screws back in, or bolts, whatever you want to call those. Torque those back into place, and then put the caps on. And here, putting that spring back into place, that was the challenge there. Getting that spring back on. And after that, you just fill the reservoir up to the max level. I drained all the old fluid out first, then put that in, and you just do the bleed process here. I use a spray bottle top to get vacuum, and you just break it open just a fraction and pump to get the old fluid out of the line and the air. ended up in the end having my wife help just to go ahead and pump the brakes. Do it that I kind of like it that way, where you just have somebody pump the brake, hold it tight, break the connection there, let the air out, and of course the fluid's going to come out. I just used the hose and it drained into the bottle, and then close it, have them pump it. Do that about 4 or 5 times on each caliper. I did it all the way around, and then when you're done, fill the reservoir back up to the max, and you're done. That's the whole process. The spray bottle thing I think worked pretty well, but still, to get 100% out, I still like to just do it the old way, to have somebody pump the brakes inside. There you can see the air bubbles coming out. That's what you're trying to do when you bleed the brakes, get the air out of the system. Thank you for watching. That's the end. I hope that helps.